And beginning with verse 40, you'll find these words. Acts chapter 2, beginning with verse 40. And with many other words, he testified and exhorted them, saying, "Be saved from this perverse generation." Then those who gladly received his word were baptized, and that day about 3,000 souls were added to them. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, in the breaking of bread, and in prayers. Then fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. Now all who believed were together and had all things in common, and sold their possessions and goods, and divided them among all as anyone had need. So continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. May God's rich blessing be to his word, may it be sanctified in our hearts. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. I want to continue this morning our thoughts from this theme, why do we need the church? Why do we need the church? And I want to speak this morning from the subject so that we might be reminded that we are a part of a family, so that we might be reminded that we are a part of a family. If one was to do a thorough investigation of the pathology, of the problems, of the challenges that we face in our society today, in just about any community that you would examine, you would find that many of our problems stems from the unprecedented breakdown and the unprecedented disintegration of the family. We sometimes fail to really appreciate and understand how significant the family is to pass on meaningful values, to pass on a culture, to pass on an inheritance, a value system, and also to pass on material wealth in the forms of a material inheritance. As I've been trying to understand what's happened to the family in West Virginia, and in particular what has happened to the African-American family in West Virginia, it's really been eye-opening. And one of the things that has been so enlightening to me was how closely connected the family is to the economy. And very seldom you hear any conversation or thought about that. What you'll find in the United States of America, that marriage and family has a direct correlation to the nature and the type of economy. For example, if you go back into 1910, about 100 years ago, in 1910, what you'll find is that in 1910, that 80% of all African American children, almost 85% of all Caucasian children, were in a two-parent household, a two-parent family, in 1910. If you fast forward to 1960, which is about the middle of the modern civil rights movement, what you find in 1960, that 75% of all African American children and nearly 80% of all Caucasian children were still in a two-parent household. That's somewhat amazing. But when you look at the economic circumstance, it better helps you understand that. The economy, and in 1910, we were really just moving from a rural agrarian economy into more of an industrial economy. And in a place like West Virginia, as I alluded to on last week, that coal literally was king. And as the Industrial Revolution really was skyrocketing in other parts of the country, that West Virginia was one of the major drivers of the industrialization of the United States of America. because the primary fuel stock was coal. So the power plants, the steel mills, the automobile manufacturers, the rail car manufacturers, they were all driven by the energy, the power that was created, and it was created by coal. So what ended up happening was there was almost 100% employment in West Virginia, particularly in the southern coal-field states. When you go as far as Fayette County and down, Fayette County, Raleigh County, Wyoming County, Mercer County, McDowell County, when you go in that area, that was a coal region, produced more coal than any other place in the world between 1910 and 1935. As a matter of fact, there was such an economic boom in West Virginia during that period of time, they literally had recruiters that went down into Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi. It wasn't necessary to go into Virginia. It was close enough that people were coming over into Virginia, just like the modern day people coming from Mexico. That's why people were flooding into West Virginia between 1910 and up to about 1930. And so much coal was being produced and so many people were being employed, they couldn't find enough people to employ them. So you had this stable economy. And as I shared with you last week, in 1910, there was 145 black men in southern West Virginia for every 100 black women, 125 into the 1920s. So there were more black men in southern West Virginia than there were black women. I mean, this is a historical anomaly. So therefore, even though there were not many employment opportunities for women outside of the home, because you know in 1910, women couldn't vote. Women didn't get the enfranchisement, the right to vote, to 1920, and so could not serve in public office and basically was limited to really second-class citizenship. But what made the woman the queen of the neighborhood was that she was the wife and that she was the bearer of the children, and she was a stabilizing influence in the community. So what I'm trying to get you to understand is that jobs is important. Employment is important because as long as there is gainful employment in a place, then what ends up happening is a part of a person's day is consumed with work. There's a reason to go to bed at night so you can get up and go to work the next day. So it puts some structure and order into your life. And so as the economy changed, as we moved from the rural to a pre-industrial, and there was a heavy need for labor. So even in 1930, as the Great Depression was starting to hit around the country, into 1935, but because of the industrialization in some other places, there was still a pull for employment opportunity, and energy still had to be created. So coal was still hiring a lot of people. So when you get into the 1940s, now you have World War II. And so with World War II, the need to produce all the weapons and armaments of war, it led to a further boom in the industrial economy. And so many people went off to war. Everybody who was left just about had employment. And women started to go to work during World War II because so many men were off at war, so they went into the factories, the textile mills, and the different places for employment. And so now you still have a boom in the economy because normally a war brings a boom to an economy, as it did during World War II. So then you come out of World War II. Now West Virginia really starts to be hit, and it starts to get hit hard because coming out of World War II, now the industrialization is now transforming itself into more of mechanization, which actually started in the 30s. In the 20s and 30s, when the continuous miners, cutters, were introduced in the coal mine, they could cut coal. You just put them up in the mine, and they just cutting inside the coal, so there's no need for a large number of unskilled labor with picks and shovels. Are you listening to me? So then after the cutters into the mines, now they bring in what's called the continuous miners and the loaders, and these things are basically robots. They cut the coal, and they got these movable arms that's moving the coal into the belt, and they're loading the coal. And so now you need a fraction of the coal mine. In 1930, there was 130,000 coal miners in West Virginia, 130,000 in West Virginia. And over half of them were in southern West Virginia. Today, we mine more coal than we did in